A few weeks ago, I said that the HTC One was the best Android phone that you can buy. But now that the Moto X has come into the picture, has my opinion changed? I'm Andrew with MobileBurn.com. Let's compare the HTC One Google Play Edition with the Motorola X. As I stated in a previous video, it's very interesting to see the HTC One and the Moto X next to each other because they have the same size screen. In both cases, you get a 4.7-inch display, but when you look at the actual shape of the devices, there's an obvious disparity in size. The one is taller, wider, but the X actually is a little thicker. So you see that difference between them. Now, in terms of the display, with the one, you get a 1080p resolution IPS. It's very bright. You're going to have a lot of pixels per inch. It looks very good. Now, on the Google Play Edition, it needs a little bit of tuning. You might need to download an app to control your color profile and brightness, but it still looks very good and looks very bright. On the X, on the other hand, it's a 720p AMOLED display. Now, there are some trade-offs with that in terms of the saturation. Looks very good. You're going to have very bright colors. When you see them side by side, you might notice that the colors are a little bit deeper and richer on the AMOLED screen in terms of saturation, but the brightness, you're going to get a weird tint to the white sometimes when you open the browser. It might be a little pinkish red depending on what you're looking at, but overall it's still a very good display. And even with the 720p resolution, you're not losing much unless you put them side by side. Going back to the shape, I actually give the edge to the Moto X because it is so compact. Even with that 4.7-inch screen, it still managed to have a much smaller profile in terms of size. It cups right into your hand, it's curved along the edges, and I really like the design and what they went with. In terms of the material, it's got a 3 composite blend on the back. It's very smooth to the touch. It has a little bit of a grip texture to it, not much, but it's still very nice to hold. The HTC One, on the other hand, is an aluminum unibody design, and that still is very impressive as well. It's something that I've loved about the One to begin with. It also has a tiny bit of a slope. Theirs is more subtle than the very sharp curves that you meet with the Moto X, but in terms of the HTC One, the design is just beautiful. You can tell the HTC put a lot into this. So in terms of size, I'd prefer the Moto X. In terms of materials, I really like the aluminum on the One. I like the way that it feels. But because it's so big, there are some challenges to it. For instance, when I need to access the power button and I'm holding the phone like this, I have to stretch my finger all the way to the top to get to it. That's pretty annoying. With the One, it's in my hand and the button's right there, right there, right there. I'm never stretching anywhere. You don't have to constantly move across. Even with my big hands, I can reach anywhere across the screen. With the One, it's a little more of a challenge. So in terms of the body design, I give the edge to the Moto X. To be fair, there is a reason why the HTC One is larger than the X, and that is because of this little guy right here, or I should say this guy as well. The One has dual stereo speakers in the front, which makes a big difference when you're listening to audio. A lot of times when you're holding a phone, the speakers are in the back or at the bottom, so it's not balanced out and you don't really get as good of a sound as you would. And that's kind of the case with the Moto X. They have a speaker in the back that is very good because it reaches a loud volume and it has decent clarity, but because it's in the back, it's not always the same effect as you get with the HTC One. Let me do a quick little demonstration. See, as my natural holding position, I'm kind of blocking the speaker, so it's not as loud, but it's not a big difference. It's still very good, as you can tell. With the HTC One, on the other hand, when I play music, see, my natural position doesn't block the speakers. Still reaches very good volume, good sound quality with the Beats audio profile and all that, whatever. But it's still very good. So that is one reason why I really love the HTC One. Whenever I'm watching videos or listening to music, I never have to worry about where my hands are, or if I put the phone flat on a fabric surface or on a desk, will I be blocking the speaker? That's not a problem with the HTC One. In terms of the internal hardware, it's pretty impressive as well. It has a 1.7 gigahertz quad-core processor, which means you're going to get a lot of power out of this. It has 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 or 64 gigabytes of storage internally, no micro SD slot. It also has a 2300 milliamp battery, Bluetooth 4.0, and an IR blaster in case you want to use it to control your television. Aside from that, on the back, it has a flash with a 5 megapixel camera, or what they call ultra pixels, which are designed to capture more light. The Moto X is not as impressive, but it's no slouch either. It has a 1.7 gigahertz dual-core processor, but it also has a couple of low-power cores handling a few other things. There's 2 gigabytes of RAM, 16 or 32 gigabytes of internal storage, and a 2200 milliamp battery. There's Bluetooth 4.0, no IR port unfortunately, but you can beam content to a television using Motorola Connect. In terms of the camera, you have flash as well, and you have a 10 megapixel clear pixel camera, which, as I mentioned with the ultra pixel camera, are designed to capture more light. Now, when it comes to performance, the HTC One typically comes out ahead because the quad-core chip is just better. But the gap between the two isn't as wide as people would make you think. On the Moto X, you still get a solid performance from the S4 Pro. Both chips are made by Qualcomm, the main processor for handling apps, and they both run the Adreno 320 GPU. So you're going to get good graphics, and you're going to get solid performance from either device. In terms of real-life usage, I find that the HTC One typically loads things just a little bit faster, but you'll still get fast loading in terms of the web, in terms of games, in terms of apps. When I'm browsing Instagram, it doesn't matter which device I'm using, I still see a lot of content often. And sometimes it scrolls a lot faster on the HTC One, but other times it's just about really, you're going to get solid performance from either device. Now, obviously, the HTC One is going to come out on top, but the gap between the two isn't as wide as you would hear. Now, about those extra cores in the Moto X. One of them is for sensors, so if you're driving really fast, it auto-replies to your text messages. And if you have the phone flat on the desk and you flip it over, your lock screen automatically starts without you having to press the power button. Then you see your notifications, and if you hold down, you can drag up to go to that specific app, or you can just drag down to unlock the phone. There's also a dedicated Google Now listening mode. So even if I don't touch the device, as you see my hands are right here, I can say, "Okay, Google Now, who is the King of Sweden?" And it's searching, it's looking it up.
Karl the 16th Gustav of Sweden is the King of Sweden.
Okay, I didn't know that. So yes, you have Google Now on the HTC One, and you can do similar things like bring up an application or bring up a, you can send a command to start playing music, get directions, all that stuff. But the problem is you have to actually touch the device and interact with it. Not really a problem, but you see what I mean. There's obviously an advantage to doing that with the Moto X, because if you're washing the dishes or if you're driving, you don't need to touch your phone. You get free hands-free stuff happening all the time. The Google Play Edition and the Moto X both look like they're running stock Android, but only one of them is, and take a guess which one. Nope, not the company owned by Google, it's the HTC One, which is running Android 4.3. The Motorola X, only Android 4.2. Now that's going to be something that happens in the future. You're going to see faster updates on the HTC One because the updates are delivered in partnership between HTC and Google. Android 4.3 came out just a few weeks ago, and within weeks, you were able to download it for the HTC One. On the Motorola X, you're going to be waiting a while for Motorola to send it to the carrier to send it back to Motorola to finalize things, and then to send it off. And that's going to be a little bit longer of a process. But in terms of everyday use, you should see a lot of similarities between the two because they use the standard versions of certain apps. The calendar, they haven't really made any changes to it. They're pretty much the same. They both use Google Chrome as their default browser. They both rely on Google Play Music. The real difference comes in the camera. Even though they have the same camera icon, they don't have the same camera interface. With the Moto X, by design, the camera interface is very simple. You tap somewhere and you take a picture. They don't want you to mess around with the controls. But at the same time, maybe you're someone who does want to mess with controls. You might be a little disappointed because all you can do is turn HDR and the flash on or off, and you can take some panoramas, and that's pretty much it. One unique thing about the camera though is that no matter where you are, even if the screen is off, if you flip your wrist like you're playing a tambourine or tightening a screw, it jumps directly into the camera app. On the Google Play HTC One, on the other hand, you do get a little more control of what you can do. You can tap to focus, which you can also do on the Moto X, but if you don't like the way that the photo is taken, you can hold down and you can turn HDR on or off. You can change the white balance, you can change the scene settings, so night mode, you can change exposure, so you can increase brightness, stuff like that. And that's something that you cannot do on the Moto X. And it's kind of disappointing because it's more necessary on the Moto X because the photos that it takes not as good as the photos taken by the HTC One. The Moto X doesn't do a good job of recognizing how to balance light sources. So if you've got a bright area on one side of the image and a dark area on the other, it's not going to come out very well. It doesn't do a very good job of metering. Doesn't let you. It doesn't auto recognize the amount of exposure that it's just set. And aside from that, a lot of times your photos will come out looking lifeless, looking a little too white. There's no real life to them. There's no oomph, when you take a picture. That's kind of disappointing, and a lot of times they'll be way too wavy. There's too much correction going on. So the Moto X can take photos in good condition sometimes, but more likely than not, the HTC One will deliver much better photos. Even though it's a 5 megapixel camera, like I said, it's all about the ultra pixels. It comes out much better than the clear pixels of the Moto X. So what's the bottom line? Well, despite having a slightly lower capacity battery, the Moto X still delivers good battery life. It still delivers a quality screen, and it has a superior design because of its compact shape, yet still giving you that big 4.7-inch screen. And the performance is good enough, so on a day-to-day basis, I could easily see making this my primary phone. But on the other hand, the HTC One delivers better performance, very good battery life, and because it's a Google Play edition, it's going to get software sooner than you will on the Moto X. And even though Google owns Motorola, they're not bringing the software as quickly to Motorola as you will on the HTC One. Then you have to factor in it has that great boom sound, dual front-facing speakers, and it has a better camera. So in the end, I think that the HTC One Google Play Edition might be a better phone. It really boils down to preference. Do you want a decent performance with some really good software features like being able to say, "Okay, Google now," and then have everything come up without issue? Or do you want to have better audio, nice big shape, at the same time it has software that's similar to the Moto X, not as feature rich, but still very good, and it has a superior camera? In the end, I prefer the HTC One Google Play Edition, but I won't fault someone for wanting something like the Moto X. It has the perfect shape, just doesn't have the perfect performance. This is Andrew with MobileBurn.com reviewing the Moto X and the HTC One Google Play Edition. You can see full reviews of each device by following the links in the description below, as well as more details and photo samples of these devices by following the same links. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, feel free to click like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.